Hey, I'm Jesse. We've arrived at Acts chapter 22. Paul's going to talk about his past, but he's going to do it with perfect humility. Have you ever heard somebody get up and share their testimony in any kind of public setting, like maybe a small group, and they like to really emphasize just how horrifically bad they were? They're almost like proud of how bad they were. There's no pride there. Watch Paul, who straight up oversaw the murder of Stephen. Okay, not the puppy I had earlier this week, the actual Stephen. He oversaw, if what's so funny too is that my liberal friends would be more upset about the murder of the puppy than they would the man Stephen. This is Paul, who went by Saul of Tarsus, the Pharisee, who oversaw a murder authoritatively. And he's going to talk about that. Okay, when you're in testimony swap mode and you're going to try to see who was the most lost before you were actually saved, Saul would have won that hands down. Otherwise you'd be having that discussion on death row. Here's Acts chapter 22. So there's a great hush, and he addresses the crowd in Aramaic. Brothers and fathers, listen now to my defense before you. When they heard that he was addressing them in Aramaic, they became even quieter. They had seriously underestimated this dude, right? Earlier, they'd accused him of bringing a Greek dude into the temple. Nobody saw him bring the Greek guy. They accused him of defiling the law of Moses. They were trying to carry out a murder while they did that. He's come under a lot of false accusation, and now it turns out he speaks Greek and Aramaic. He's obviously learned. He continued, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel, most renowned rabbi of his day. According to the law of our ancestors, I was zealous for God, just as all of you are today. I persecuted this way to the death. Way was our own self-given name before we were called Christians. And putting both men and women in jail, as both the high priest and the whole council of elders can testify about me. After I received letters from them to the brothers, I traveled to Damascus to arrest those who were there and bring them to Jerusalem to be punished. And then what follows is his testimony, which we're going to preach about this weekend and get a glimpse of tomorrow. Notice the way that he confesses his sin. He's established credibility now with this largely Jewish audience. When he was in Artemis, at the temple of Artemis, they wouldn't have cared about Gamaliel. Nobody knew who Gamaliel was. But now he's speaking to an almost exclusively male crowd of Jews who knew Aramaic, who knew the name Gamaliel. That was a name drop of the century right there. Gamaliel was incredibly esteemed, and Paul was his student. The way that the rabbinic tradition worked is that you would walk behind your rabbi at a distance with your head down. And when you would walk on dusty roads, they didn't have pavement like we do today. The dust would come up and would cover you. And so a common blessing to a rabbinic student was, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. Paul's rabbi was Gamaliel. He had aced Beit Sefer and Beit Talmud and Beit Midrash and then Beit Talmud, and then was tutored not just by any rabbi but by Gamaliel. So he basically just showed his educational credentials, and they're impeccable. And he confessed his sin without pride. This is how you confess, man. You own your stuff, and you speak it out without excuse. You don't pass the blame for it to anybody else. You don't try to polish your sin and make it seem less sinful. You don't try to rationalize your sin. Just confess, this is what I've done. And you're going to find that actually makes you more relatable to the people with whom you're sharing the gospel. Paul now just established credibility both in terms of his pedigree as a Pharisee and also in his honesty as a man. He's just spoken some horribly shameful things about himself. He was throwing women in jail and men. He was throwing multiple people in jail, and good grief, he oversaw the execution of Stephen. He was persecuting this Christian movement before he became a part of it. So he acknowledges even the duplicity in that. He's even confessing his own past hypocrisy here. This is how you confess sin. And the result is people will listen to you. How might God take your own past sin and redeem it? I know it's a scary thing to publicly confess sin. Believe me, I know that. I've been there. But what I've found on the other side, for the most part, especially for the people who really love Jesus, is there's grace. And there's this thing called redemption. Google it. It's great. This is how you establish credibility. This is what Paul did. Stay tuned. He's about to tell his story, and it's incredible. just like yours. This is the book of Acts, and it's happening today. Let's live it out together. Are you ready? Go.